Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be doing episode 4 of the Maserati build series. We're going to get you guys caught up on everything that Martin has been doing in the last couple of days, so let's get right to it.
Since last time you guys saw Steve and Corey over the weekend, they took the dashboard apart so I can see what's behind this firewall. Basically, after the dash was out, I found out that there's about 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch in between the blower, the AC and the heater blower, and the firewall. So I don't know if you can see it, I already did it, but I massaged this firewall about that much. And if you press against it, you can feel that plastic blower underneath it. So you know that this is the limitation of how much you can push in. And next thing we're gonna do is set the engine back in and push it all the way back to where I want to see if the shifter will line up.
So now that Martin got the engine lined up where he wants it, we can see that the shifter actually lines up really well with the original cutout, which means it will be able to use the original slot from the center console that's there and be able to leave the shifter intact. Now that we know that the shifter is in the correct location, Martin can keep the engine placement that we have and begin to modify the crossmember and be able to begin making the engine mounts for this car.
Another big challenge we're coming across on this build is that rack placement wasn't going to work with the OEM layout, since the engine and transmission that we're using is a Japanese engine versus, you know, its original configuration was completely off. So we quickly decided that we're going to convert this into a front rack steering. It sounds easy, but you have to, you know, think about all these things, like, you know, how are we going to set up the lower control arm? How are we going to modify the steering knuckle? Thought about it for a little bit. We decided that we're going to use all the suspension pickup point geometry original. Only thing we're going to change is the tie rod pickup point. So I actually swapped the shocks and springs from one side to the other, so we would have a lot of room right here, not having caliper in a way. This arm, which I cut off from the back, like I said, we're moving the steering rack from the back to the front of the arm. I don't know if you zoom in, these are tack welded. Keeping the same kind of pivot geometry. Like, I measured the original one and I made sure, you know, this got put in the same exact length, so your steering response is not going to change. But later, once we mount the rack, we're gonna have to modify this so that we can get the proper Ackerman. We were sizing up the motor to the car and also subframe, front subframe, against the motor and the car. And I kept, you know, cutting stuff away little by little so that I can keep as much original metal as possible. So I didn't have to, you know, modify the suspension pickup points and stuff like that. So this is what I came up with, and I know for a fact, since the last time, since the last mock-up, you know, this cross member is going to totally work as long as I notch it like this and box it. So I'm going to do that right now. I made these little templates. We're going to cut some 1/8 inch metal, and we're going to tack weld it, and we're going to bolt it on fully to the car and finish welding it, so you end up with a nice form-fitted cross member.
So Martin's now welding the cross member while it's up inside the car bolted in. It's really important that you do this because the cross member acts as the front support for the engine mounts, the engine and everything else in the front part of the car. So it's important that you have that structure really strong and sound before you weld on any engine mounts or anything else onto the car. If we had a jig for this car that we could put this in and make it work with a jig, that's what we would do. But without a jig, it's best to have it bolted straight up to the car and be able to get it nice and sound structure and fit to the car. So Martin is currently adding a gusset right next to the tension rod mounting place. It's really important to add extra strength here after we cut off a lot of the material surrounding this.
The next day.
Martin spent the morning mocking up the engine mounts, did some mock-ups, and now he is welding on the actual final engine mounts here. The goal is to get these all welded up, and then there is a temporary transmission mount underneath the car, and once the engine mounts are put in, we can have the engine stable in the car. We can take it off the stand, be able to lift the car up on the lift, and be able to weld the transmission mount on underneath the car. So Martin's engine mounts are holding. You can see them here. He's making use of the original Beams engine mounts, and he's just made his own mounts right onto the cross member. The car is for the very first time actually up in the air with the engine in it. The transmission mount that I told you guys about earlier that Martin made as a temporary is just right back here. He's gonna have to make a new one, of course. That's just a temporary setup. Again, he's probably gonna just make use of this original Beams rubber mount here to take some of the load. So that's going to be it for this video. Thank you guys for watching. In the next one, Martin is going to be mounting the new front rack steering rack and then finishing the front suspension. We'll see you then.